Greetings and salutations, my great friends. Let's get out of the pizza party, which once again is just a metaphor for a less than desirable life. We're going to start this one out with a quote from the great Eckhart Tolle, author of really many great books. Your past is a bottomless pit. Your past is a bottomless pit. All you have is right now. Your past is a bottomless pit. All you have is right now. And then if we ask ourselves, what are people doing looking into their past? Once again, from multiple decades in the coaching industry, helping individuals and organizations to become the greatest versions of themselves. When I ask people, what do you think about when you think of the past? They think of their failures and things they didn't do. They think of their failures and the things they didn't do. And then year after year, more perceived failures and more things they didn't do. They keep adding on to the list and being like a 1,000,000-pound weight on their backs. And like I always tell them, we can undo this rather quickly. And we're going to do a little story about George Washington to illustrate this point. The great George Washington, the first president of this great country that we live in. Now, most people, when you ask, hey, what do you know of George Washington? They go, oh, you know, he was in the American Revolution. He was a general. He was our first president. But what a lot of people don't know about good old George is that he was a commander in the French and Indian War. Really? Oh my gosh. Now, the important part about this is good old George, some people even believe this conflict he was in, this perceived failure he had, is what led to the French and Indian War. But in a nutshell, without going too deeply into history, he spent some time, partaking in the old bottle, numbing his emotions, and he let the soldiers that were in his command also do that as well. And they were in a battle, and because they weren't their best, they lost. And this resulted in a treaty being signed that ultimately led to increased hostilities between the Indians and the people who were trying to settle this country. So, lost a battle. He was a poor leader. But to quote the great Andy Andrews from the book The Traveler's Gift, good old George knew the buck stops here. The buck stops here. He didn't utter it was his fault. He didn't blame anyone else. He looked in the mirror and he said the buck stops here. Now, ultimately, he used that to channel him into being one of the greatest generals the world has ever known, and he used it to become the first president of the United States. And for people who were into history, and it wasn't just George, it was a couple other ones, we were largely outnumbered by the British, but we won the American Revolution, and this country was able to be formed because of things that we learned from the Indians. Hit and run, guerrilla tactics. So George didn't blame anyone else. He didn't utter it was my fault, and he didn't let his failures stop him from becoming a great general and the first president of the United States. Now, since we know it says all men are created equal, all women are created equal, that means you can do the same thing in your life. So the lesson today is take a sheet of paper and write out all of your perceived failures. Okay? I know I actually needed 10 sheets of paper to write out all mine. And then, after you've done that, hey, and this really works. You got to take pen to paper, people. There's magic in it. With each of those failures, write out all of the things that you learned. And you're going to go, oh my God, I learned so much. And then, lastly, ask yourself, if I'm faced with a similar situation again, how will I take this lesson I learned and apply it so that I now have wisdom, which is knowledge that you're actually using. And then what that will do is it will reframe the narrative in your head that these things were actually failures, because they weren't. You learned something from them. And the more you understand that you learn from your failures and that it's okay to fail and there's no such thing in the world as perfection, it will allow you to begin to rewrite the narrative in your head. I'm so glad Thomas Edison, when he failed on creating a light bulb for 999 times, he didn't give up and he kept going so that we have these great light bulbs. Once again, to rewrite the narrative in your head, positive affirmations daily, mission statement daily, pick a song that you listen to that allows you to get fired up for your mission every day, write out all of your perceived failures, write out everything you learned from them so that you understand you never failed, you only learned. And that narrative will begin to get rewritten. To quote the great Andy Andrews in closing, adversity and failures are simply preparing you for the greatness you can become. Adversity and failures are simply preparing you for the greatness that is to come. But you'll never achieve your greatness if you don't rewrite your narrative. See ya at the next video. Love you all.
Newsflash, everyone has failures. They do not define you. Learn to embrace them, and remember what Michael Jordan once said, it only becomes a habit if you quit once. Thank you for never quitting on our channel, and please hit like, subscribe, and share.